Picture eating lunch 1,000 feet underground in total darkness, air thick with coal dust. No fridge, no microwave, just a metal pail packed before sunrise. That was daily life for coal miners across West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, southwestern Virginia, and the bituminous fields of western Pennsylvania during the 1940s and 1950s. Shifts began around 5 in the morning, and lunch happened wherever the coal face was that day, often on a damp wooden plank or an empty coal car. There was no cafeteria and no real break, just the foreman's stopwatch running and the ventilation fans thrumming somewhere far above. The air itself was thick with coal dust and diesel fumes from underground machinery, which is exactly why that pail had to double as a fully sealed container. Today we're opening 25 of the real lunches these men carried, the tin pail that held them, and why every single one of them vanished from mining life. You'll see exactly what filled that pail, why it smelled the way it did for 20 years straight, and the 3 waves of change that ended the tradition for good. Start with the pail itself, because it wasn't just a lunchbox, it was a small piece of engineering built for underground survival. Most pails were pressed tin with a hinged lid and a wire or wooden handle, deep enough to hold a full day's food in one sealed upper compartment. A common version, called a dinner bucket, had a separate lower chamber just for cold black tea or a tin cup, keeping liquid apart from solid food. The Smithsonian's National Museum of American History still holds a Walter Rothacker pail, used in the Minersville, Pennsylvania coal mines in the mid-20th century. The Beckley Exhibition coal mine in West Virginia displays a vintage Harlan County tin pail, showing the exact same design used across the whole Appalachian region. Miners kept these pails spotless, not for cleanliness, but because coal dust caked into every seam and leftover food smell drew rats straight to the workface. That daily threat of rats is exactly why a spotless pail mattered more to a miner than a spotless plate. Now to the food itself, because the menu barely changed from one mining town to the next, and there's a real reason for that. Cold biscuits wrapped in wax paper or a cloth napkin were the daily staple of the pail. When biscuit flour ran short at home, wedges of cornbread took their place instead. Jarred pickled eggs were almost a signature item of the coal miner's lunch. Vinegar kept those eggs safe for hours underground, and the protein carried a man through an 8 or 9-hour shift of physical work. Sardines eaten straight off crackers were common too, a quick source of protein that needed no cooking or cooling. Salt pork, fried the night before, got eaten stone cold at the coal face without complaint. Pinto beans, cooked in cast iron the evening before, got packed into a tin cup for the morning walk down. A sweet potato baked in the previous night's embers rounded out many of these pails. A wedge of home-canned green beans or a single boiled egg often closed things out. A slice of pie was a luxury, saved only for payday weeks when there was a little extra to spare. Getting even that small luxury meant timing lunch packing around the payday calendar itself, not around what tasted good. One Appalachian historian summed up the entire tradition in a single line: a piece of meat, some beans, and cornbread wrapped in cloth. That was lunch. Here's what made this lunch culture so different from anything today. The pail itself cost more than the food sitting inside it. Miners weren't wealthy men, so the pail was treated as a durable good, expected to last 20 years or longer. The same pail sometimes got passed down to a son, and the same style of lunch got packed into it for years on end. The coal smell soaked so deep into that metal over the years that it never fully left. Every miner's bucket smelled unmistakably of the mines. So if the food in the pail stayed this consistent for decades, what actually made 25 generations of packed lunches disappear almost overnight? The answer comes in 3 separate waves, and the first one is safety regulation. State and federal mining laws, starting in the 1960s, gradually required pithead baths at every mine so men could wash before heading home. Those bathhouses came paired with a dry mess hall that served hot food to crews coming off shift, removing the need to carry lunch underground at all. The second wave landed as federal law, the Coal Mine Health and Safety Act of 1969. That was followed by the far more sweeping Federal Mine Safety and Health Act of 1977. These 2 laws reshaped underground working conditions so heavily that a man eating alone on a wooden plank in total darkness simply stopped being normal. The third wave came from the company's store itself, which in towns where it hadn't already replaced home-cooked meals, turned into an actual cafeteria. Mechanization cut the size of underground crews first, then cut the number of underground mines altogether. The small towns that had spent decades packing these lunches shrank right along with the coal seams they depended on. Whole company towns that once had 100 pails packed at 5 in the morning eventually had none packed at all. By the 1990s, this entire lunch pail culture survived mostly in museum exhibits, family memory, and the occasional pickup truck lunch carried to a surface job. It's worth knowing where this tradition actually came from, because American coal country didn't invent it out of nothing. British miners carried a triangular tin snap pail, built to hold one thick wedge of bread with dripping or jam. That snap pail tradition predates the American coalfields by decades, carried across the Atlantic in the memories and habits of immigrant families. The word snap itself simply meant a miner's lunch, both in British pit villages and later among immigrant mining families. That British tradition crossed the Atlantic and reshaped itself into the American dinner bucket you heard about earlier in this video. What survives of all this today sits mostly in 3 places: the National Museum of American History, the Beckley Exhibition Coal Mine, and a handful of oral history projects. Those recordings capture miners themselves describing pails, smells, and lunches that no younger generation will ever have to pack before a 5 a.m. shift. Every detail in this video, the pickled eggs, the tin cup of beans, the 20-year-old pail, came directly from those preserved records and museum pieces. None of it is guesswork, because the miners who lived it and the institutions that saved their pails left behind exactly what they carried underground. Think about what that pail actually represented: 3 minutes of packing before dawn, decades of the same smell, and a design built purely to survive coal, dust, and rats. It wasn't fancy food. It wasn't varied food. But it was food engineered to survive 8 hours in total darkness without spoiling or drawing attention. Even the shape of a modern insulated lunchbox traces its lineage back to that same sealed tin design. Compare that to a modern mine worker walking into a heated cafeteria for a hot meal, and the distance between those two realities is the entire story. And the moment the bathhouse, the cafeteria, and federal law arrived together, that entire engineered ritual had no reason left to exist. That's the real story behind 25 forgotten lunches. Not one dish disappearing, but an entire underground way of eating erased by regulation and mechanization within a single generation. If you found this piece of forgotten American work history interesting, there's another video on this channel digging into a completely different disappearing tradition. Go watch that one next, because the same pattern, quiet, unglamorous work quietly erased by progress, shows up there too, told through a totally different story.